Tanya Moore. I'm one of the editors alongside Gloria Simango of the book, The Anti-Racist Social Worker. So if there's one take-home message from the book, we really hope it's that an anti-racist position is an active one. So we present anti-racism as a verb, not an adjective, because systemic racism is a powerful default position. So we think that to be anti-racist must mean to actively disrupt the status quo. So as far as we're concerned, it's not enough to think non-racist thoughts. Anti-racism must be an action. And our campaign, Social Work Action 21, is the campaign of action that took place when a small group of social workers who met online came together to agitate for change. Each of this diverse group of social workers, we each had our own reasons for needing to take action against racism. And it's these very personal stories of lived experience and direct action that for the most part make up this book. So in our book, you get to meet the inspirational social work students, Diana Katoto and Omar Mohammed, who in the first year of their social work degree, they staged a campaign to decolonialise the social work training curriculum. Theirs is an important campaign in its own right, but their story reminds us that we can all be activists. In joining in with the Social Work 21 action campaign, Diana and Omar were working alongside experienced social workers, academics and practice leaders. Whatever the status of our day job, our shared values and anti-racist vision pulled us together. Wherever we are in our career, social work activism can and should remain central to the way we learn and practice as social workers. Chapter 4, we've got Zoe Thomas's personal and powerful polemic showing us why this absolutely must happen. So Zoe's is a story of academic activism in which she explores her own existence as a Black social work academic and considers how her commitment to own that space can create discomfort and disruption. Zoe presents her model for reparations in social work education. It's a practical and highly applicable suggestion for university action. And I know at least one organisation is taking up some of the ideas from this already. So we think that racism is a problem created by white people. So it's for white people to lead on its destruction. While there's no sense or use in individual white people feeling guilty for the collective impact of centuries of structural racism, there is a clear responsibility for every white person to recognise racism and its impact and take individual ownership of their part in its destruction. Liz Howard's journey to allyship is the story of her increasing understanding as a white social worker of what it means to have white privilege and her determination to take meaningful action. Liz charts her realisation that inactive, albeit benign non-racism, is a dangerous position that supports racist structures and shows how she uses her role to actively promote anti-racist action. As a white British academic from a mixed heritage family, Jo Williams considers her developing awareness and understanding of racism in both her personal and her professional life. Her chapter is beautifully presented. It's a very personal story of learning from others and how this helps her on her own journey to becoming an anti-racist social worker and educator. The Black Lives Matter campaign focuses our attention and calls for urgent action to combat racism towards people who have Black or brown skin, and rightly so. There's an urgent need for white people to understand how hard it is to be Black in a world that assumes and prizes white. But specific, predominantly white ethnic groups are also subjected to racism, which, although experienced differently, is dangerous and equally undermining to any sense of safety and belonging. So Romani, Traveller and Jewish people share a shattering recent history in the Holocaust, which saw 500,000 Roma people and 6 million Jewish people murdered. Anti-Gypsy, Roma and Traveller, that's GRT racism, is so deeply ingrained in mainstream culture that it's explicitly built into professional practice, because GRT families are viewed with suspicion and their sites are routinely assessed as high-risk visits. In our chapter 7, Dan Allen, Doreen Dove, Alison Humes and Merte Maloney Nictane offer a personal and current connection to GRT communities with rich and precious histories. This is an important contribution to social work's understanding of racism and anti-racist practice. To be Jewish is to live with a visceral existential threat. Put simply, it means living with the knowledge that the veneer of acceptance can shatter in an instant, and there can never be a sense of safety and belonging. Unique to anti-Semitism as a form of racism is the racist trope of power and wealth that makes Jewish people appear to be a fair target. The result is that few people are prepared to step forward as allies, and as anti-Semitic attacks and calls for the death of all Jewish people rise, echoes of the Holocaust reverberate, and the responding silence is deafening. Victoria Hart's History of Anti-Semitism in our chapter 8 notes how even though being Jewish is a protected characteristic, anti-Semitism is not recognised as racism by social work, and its terrifying impact is not acknowledged. If open conversation is the starting point for awareness, understanding, and ultimately action, there needs to be careful consideration of how those who are prepared to accept the vulnerability of speaking out can be supported. So in chapter 9, we've got Lydia Guthrie and Marie Otten sharing their story of creating a forum for talking about racism, inequality, and anti-racist practices. Conversations about race can be difficult and emotive, but Lydia and Marie show how a conversation underpinned by systemic thinking and practice can be a means to support safe and purposeful dialogue and action. And then in chapter 10, Jen Hooper and Akwesi Sefo-Boyaki describe how they created separate spaces for Black and white workers to talk about race, both separately and together. Doing this enabled safe discussions about the undermining nature of subtle individual racism, as well as organisational and institutional racism. So this fabulous chapter includes a practical discussion on how these groups can be set up and facilitated in different teams, and thoughts on how to ensure the work of the group remains relevant going forward. Baldish McGarren's story is in chapter 11, and this is on the building of a grassroots conversation about diversity across a whole social care department. The open discussion about racism that was provoked by George Floyd's murder gave her the confidence and determination to speak out more widely and loudly. Baldish introduced an email thread entitled "Let's Talk About Race," which sparked a conversation which took place through email over a number of weeks and between a diverse group of colleagues. Through email, a platform was created in which colleagues were able to draw permission and confidence from each other to speak out. So as social workers, we strongly believe that change can begin at an individual level, but collectively and organisationally, we can achieve so much more. Liz Fergus and Chi Nais Bimbo's story in our chapter 12 is of their work across a large social care department to create organisational change that can be owned and actioned at every level of the service. But the social care res takes the landscape even wider. Having seen the overwhelming whiteness of senior leaders in a social care conference, a small group of social workers took action to challenge the status quo. So in chapter 13, we've got Mark Harvey, Namal Jude, and Zahal Shafiq's story showing how this original action has led to the creation of a workforce racial equality strategy and a nationwide systemic attempt to combat racism in social care. I mean, such activism is rooted in social work's history, and it continues to be cherished as integral to our role. Although many of us in the UK are employed by local government, our professional identity encourages questioning, challenge, and the taking of action to promote social justice and shape social policy. But in chapter 14, Sherlyn Graham and Catherine Greenlaw argue that activism should be similarly embedded within the allied health professions. Racism reduces opportunity for occupation, and activity is axiomatic to occupational therapy. Their story shows how they're building anti-racist activism into their professional identity and calls to occupational therapists to similarly take action. So the stories in our book are of individual, organisational, and national level activism. Each chapter, we think, or we hope, shows a positive and precious energy that forms part of the drive for change. Like social work practice, social work action sets change in motion. Impact is seen over time and in different ways. To be anti-racist demands personal and professional responsibility for action. And we really hope that our stories will encourage colleagues across social care and allied health professions to see their own potential to make change. And we call upon everyone to join us in rising against racism. Thank you.